There
There
we
we go. Okay, we're recording. So welcome everybody. Let me welcome you again. And it's so nice to have such a lovely group come on and see old friends and activists and all the rest of it. Um, this is a great pleasure for me. This is our sixth virtual Gombin gathering. So since December, we have met six times. We have done tours of places and people. And um, um, before we start today's program, I just want to say a few things about Virtual Gombin. You know, this was our effort to respond to the pandemic. Like many organizations that I'm sure you all belong to are doing Zoom gatherings. And it's actually been wonderful because it's brought in people who couldn't possibly travel to a meeting, and it's made us more international. We've always been an international society, but we haven't seen each other because it's not that easy. And we're not able to go to Poland yet, but we're hoping that we will be able to go back to Poland maybe in the fall, uh, maybe have another annual meeting. I should also remind you that I think Lindsey will give us the exact dates, but the 100th anniversary of the Gombin Society will soon come up, so that you know we have much to be grateful for and to plan for in the future. I have to make a pitch. I'm president of the Gombin Society that we can't do this without your financial support. So I want to thank all of you who've contributed and donated and paid your membership dues and all of that. But to others, please help us continue these activities. The installation and unveiling of the memorial in Gombin is no small feat. It's taken many years, and it's required us to financial support. So please help us do it. And just to fill in the information that Vicki already mentioned, the date will be June 9th. It's not a convenient date for us necessarily, but it's good for the mayor of Gombin. So it'll be in the afternoon in Gombin. Um, on a Wednesday, June 9th at 4 p.m. there, which out here in California is going to be what, Marlene, about 7 a.m., something like that. But it works, it actually works everywhere that we have Gombiners, including all the way from Israel in the east to California in the west. So we're really happy that this event will take place. We're grateful to the leadership of Gombin for finally approving it, and for Wojtek and his team for putting together the actual memorial plaque that will be installed. And I want to move on now to today's program. So I'm delighted to be the person who gets to introduce Lindsey. Um, I've got some notes here for myself, so you won't mind if I look down occasionally, but she grew up in the DC area, went to Emory University where she studied anthropology and religion, and then to grad school at Savannah College for Art and Design, where she did a master's in fine arts and photography. Um, the majority of her photo work has been either documentary projects that aim to destigmatize taboos or photojournalism. Right now, she's been an intern at the Smithsonian Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage. Her interest in documentary photography began in the second grade when she saw an exhibition about the Holocaust. Those photos made her understand the Shoah in an entirely new way. I'm delighted that she's agreed to join the board of the Gombin Society. We need young people in her generation to join us, and she's a great spokesman for them. So thanks, Mom, for helping out. Um, so um, her topic today is History Lost and Found, Tracing My Gombiner Roots Through the Jewish Diaspora. And I'm going to turn over to Lindsey Max. Let me remind you also that there will be a recording made here. This entire presentation will be available on the Gombin website. If you haven't been there, please visit it. I guess my guess is you probably have, but you can see all the former virtual Gombins and the future virtual Gombins there. So Lindsey, we turn it over to you. Thank you for doing this presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me to do this presentation and for asking me to join the board. So hi, I'm Lindsey. Um, my great-great-grandfather came over from Gombin in either 1891 or 92. Different records say different things. And I'll talk about that a little more. And so my talk is going to be about the article I wrote for my internship with the Smithsonian. So hopefully you'll get a chance to read it. And I guess with that, I'll get started. Should we do a screen share?
Yes, do screen share. Can you do it?
I think you might need to give me.
Oh, Vicky needs to.
Okay. So you need to do it with my screen.
Oh, Vicky says I'm now the host.
Yeah, so you're sharing your screen. I need to share my screen.
Hold on. Do you have permission to share?
I'm not seeing it. Where would it?
You have to give permission to share, give me back hosting, and then I'll give it permission to share for everybody. Bernie.
I don't know how to do that.
So hang on. You need to click on your name or click on my name. And under the more, it'll say make host or allow to be host, something thereof.
Here, okay.
So,
Change host.
so change host to me.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. And now I will do multiple people can share. So Lindsay, you should be able to share at this point.
All right, here we go.
There you go. Now, Bernie, I'm going to make you host again.
Okay.
I don't know if that'll mess up. You know what? I'll keep the host, but I'm going to just mute myself and take my video off, and then we can proceed and it'll be fine.
Why isn't this letting me start?
Lindsay, do the presentation down at the bottom. There's a little screen, bottom of your screen now, just to the right of there. Yeah, right there, right there. Do that.
There we go.
There you go.
All right, so like Bernie said, this is about the article I just wrote called History Lost and Found, Tracing My Gombiner Roots Through the Jewish Diaspora. So starting out with family history. Before learning about the Gombin Society, I didn't know a lot about my family history. A few little family legends. I knew we had a dairy business, which as you can see here, Bloomingdale Dairy Company. Family legend was that my great-great-grandfather Abe it was his idea. He came up with the idea to sorry, I think I got cut off. Family legend says that my great-great-grandfather Abe came up with the concept to deliver milk to people's houses in refillable milk bottles, thus becoming the first milkman. We can confirm that there was a dairy business. I think saying that he was the first milkman is a bit of a stretch. But here you can see his face. The rest is artistic liberties I took, but this is an advertisement for Bloomingdale Dairy. This is one of the bottles. And you can see the A on the front for his name, Abe. And then on the back on the other side, there's an M for Manchik. So I didn't know a lot about my family history until Michael Kaplan, who's on here. Hi, Michael, thank you. His wife, Ellen, is my dad's cousin, and Michael had been doing a lot of genealogy research, and they found out that before our last name was Max, because I think we all know that Max isn't a Jewish last name. And one of our family legends was that when Abe came over and was at Ellis Island, one story was that they couldn't pronounce Manchik and they just changed it to Max. Another story was that he was meeting someone here named Max and he didn't understand any of the questions they were asking him. So he just kept saying Max over and over again. And that's how our name became Max. After doing my research, neither of those are correct. But nevertheless, when I was about a senior in high school, I found out that our last name was Manchik, which, as you can see by my Scrabble tiles, if that was a Scrabble word, it would be 27 points without any bonuses. It's a lot of consonants together. So had I not been told how to pronounce it, there's no way that I could have. And along with the information that our name was actually Manchik, was also the information that we came from a little shtetl in Poland named Gombin. And not just that, we had been part of a Gombin Society. And the way that my dad explained it to me was that it was an immigrant organization for newly arrived immigrants to help each other out. You know, you just got here, you need a place to stay, come stay with me for a little bit. You need a job, my brother needs an apprentice. You need a nice Jewish boy for your daughter, my son's a mensch, match made in heaven, it's b'shert. So that was my original understanding of the Gombin Society. And so from these documents that I found and that Michael found, you can see, I'm sure a lot of you are probably familiar with the AKT, the register from Gombin. And so as you can see, there were a bunch of Manchiks who lived there. And going off of this, I could trace some genealogy and learn more about my family history, which was really exciting because the fact that I hadn't known a lot aside from some family legends, it was nice to have some concrete facts. So again, I was told I was from this shtetl called Gombin, but what was that? What did that mean? When I was told, oh, we came from this little shtetl, the first image I had in my head was Anna Tevka, Fiddler on the Roof. And I learned that that is very much not the case. So in 2013, I'm sure some of you attended, the Gombin Society held a 90th anniversary celebration. And I was really glad. I'd been studying abroad in India and had come back about 2 weeks before. And so I was so excited that I was able to make it. One of the facts that Michael had told us when he told us about Manchik and Gombin was also that we had relatives in Brazil who we thought had died in the Holocaust. And you can see here, that is my great uncle, Luger Manchik. He kept the last name and he traveled all the way by himself from Brazil to make it to the reunion. And it was so nice to meet him and to meet other relatives, dads, cousins, nieces, etc. So right here, that was the whole Max Manchik contingent at the reunion. We still have the little invitation with our name tags and everything. And it was a really, really fun experience. And I love the information that I learned. I love telling people about it, but I had never signed up for the mailing list. Occasionally my dad would forward me an email or two, but I was in college, lots of distractions, etc., etc. While I was in college, my parents decided to make a trip to Gombin. Thanks for inviting me. I was not invited. I'm still bitter about it. But hopefully I will be able to go and make my own trip there soon. And so, like I said, I hadn't for a while really been involved in the Gombin Society. And this summer, I got my internship position with the Smithsonian Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage. And right about the same time, Michael had reached out to all of the Maxes who he could get in touch with that he was working on a family biography project. And then within another few days, we also found out that one of those relatives who I'd met at the reunion had just passed away. And so all these things happening at the same time, it kind of felt like a sign that this is what I should write my article on. When I first got the internship, there were 2 other articles I was thinking about doing and started trying to do them a little bit, and they weren't working out. And I got this email and I talked to my boss and I was like, you know, my family, this is our story. There was this society, it still exists. And he was all excited about it. He was like, yes, do it. So then I started with my research, which started at my dad's home office, where he had a bunch of files and boxes and documents kind of hidden away among the other things in his office. And I went through everything. I was up all night finding things, reading things, organizing them. And I found some pictures of older relatives, but I think what was coolest for me was when I found this little pendant right here, because it's hard to read on the back, but it has Abe's name on it. And that's the only physical, tangible thing I have of his or had ever seen of his. So then I started with genealogy, was on ancestry.com, was looking up as many different files, documents that I could find, building the tree as much as I could, looking up pictures, just spending a lot of time on there and looking up the genealogy. And that got a little distracting because when I started working on this article, I wasn't sure, how much of this should be about me and my family and my path of discovery about my family and our funny family stories, and how much of it should be about our Gombin heritage, specifically in the Gombin Society. And so there was just so much information to go through and to learn. And it was so hard to figure out, the balance, but also there's no way I can include everything in this article. And how do I decide what to keep and what not to keep? So after going through some family stuff, I went to the Gombin Society website and the Yitzker book, and I started with the newsletter that followed the 90th anniversary celebration, where the lovely Harold Bowl had a nice long writing about the history of the Gombin Society. So that was kind of my starting off point. And then I just went through the website, looked through all the newsletters, all the family stories, all the pictures, everything about the synagogue, just trying to get as much information as I could. Going through the Yitzker book, it took us a while to find our own physical copy that was hidden somewhere in the house, but luckily a copy is online and also translates the Yiddish side. And this article took me a long time to write, partly because with every new piece of information I was learning, I would start to go off on a tangent. I'd learn one thing, I'd start to try to learn more about that specific thing. I'd try to find corroboration because, as I'd mentioned before, anytime I found a document, they weren't always very consistent. Some had my great-great-grandfather arriving in 1891, some were 92, some said Manchik, some said Max, some said Marx. So just finding one little fact and then trying to confirm it and trying to figure out all these ways to learn more about it, where to search, and the deeper I went, the deeper down a rabbit hole I would get, eventually to the point where I started setting alarms on my phone to go off every hour so that I could snap back and be like, hi, you've been spending an hour trying to confirm that this one picture may or may not be a distant relative. You need to get back on track. And so among the things I discovered during my research, as I said, no two records have the same information. Oral history tends to be a bit of a mix of fact and legend. Yes, family had a dairy company. No, we were not the first milkmen. But among some facts I could confirm was that the Gombin Society started as actually the Gombin Relief Committee in 1920. And my great-great-grandfather was actually among one of the founders, which I never knew. You know, I knew we were a part of this society, we participated, but finding out that he was actually one of the founders was really fascinating, really touching. And then I learned that the Gombin Society formally became the Gombin Society in 1923. So in 2 years, 2023, it will be the 100th anniversary, which is incredible to think about, that this has been around for 100 years and that we're still meeting, we're doing these virtual sessions with people all around the world. That was actually one of my favorite discoveries. I shouldn't say favorite because there were so many things I really, really liked. But one thing that was really meaningful to me was when we did the first of these virtual Gombin sessions and looking in the chat on the side, seeing everyone introducing themselves. Hello from Israel, hello from Paris, hello from Canada, hello from California. It was so cool to see that Gombiners have spread throughout the world and that we're still connected in this way and reconnecting. I also learned that there were many chapters. It wasn't just New York, it was New York, it was Newark, it was Detroit, it was Chicago. So even from the beginning, we were already starting to spread out, but still remain in touch with each other. So after doing a lot of my own research, looking up as much as I could, writing a few drafts, kind of came to the consensus that I needed more voices in my article, not just my own. And so the Gombin Society helped me with that. They helped me compose this email to send out to the whole mailing list, asking for members to reach out to me so that I could talk to them about their family history, about their experience with the Gombin Society, either past or present. And I was floored with the responses. I had 8 Gombiners respond the same day that the email was sent out, and 4 of those were within the first 15 minutes. I couldn't believe how many people actually read the email, wanted to participate, were so excited. It was really powerful to me. And overall, I had about 23 people reach out. And of those 23, I interviewed 18 of them. And as I said, not just the people participating in the virtual Gombin sessions from around the world, but the people I interviewed were from around the world. So being able to connect, not just through a little chat box in one group session, but to actually connect on a more personal basis with people around the world was just really cool. It felt like I was part of one big family. As I mentioned in my article, when I was growing up, none of my relatives lived in the area. My cousins were in New Jersey and Connecticut, older siblings were in different places, grandparents in different places. And I was always really jealous of my friends who had relatives that lived close by them and could see their cousins all the time and their grandparents. And so one of the things I really appreciated about the Gombin Society was that, from my understanding of its origins, it was like one big Gombiner family. Everyone was in a new country. They were far from home, in a much bigger place than they'd ever lived before, you know, from a small little shtetl where you're familiar with the streets, you're familiar with most of the people, to go into a brand new country. You might not speak the language. There's people from everywhere. It was really, it seemed like a family for people to help each other out, to stay close to each other. And so working on this project and meeting all of you, it felt like I was getting more relatives and like I was getting closer to people. And that was really powerful for me. And so I think one of my favorite quotes was our lovely Ada Holtzman. It seemed to sum it up perfectly. She said, "In the shtetl, and Gombin is the mirror of all shtetls, everybody was related." And that wasn't just my interpretation. Multiple people I interviewed would say things like, I thought these were all my cousins. I thought these were my family. I didn't realize that these people weren't genetically related to me for years. And when I started working on this article, I hadn't thought about the family aspect. I was thinking more from a historical significance. And it wasn't until I did these interviews and kept getting that response about growing up and going to these picnics and these events and spending holidays together and weddings and birthdays and still being in touch even after the society kind of faded for a little bit before Harold and Leon revived it in the 90s. The fact that I heard from multiple people that Gombiners and the society were all a family, it wasn't until doing those interviews and hearing those testimonials that I realized that that was where this article was going, and that was the heart of this article, especially when I realized how, you know, the Gombin Society started as a bit more of a charity, a relief committee, a social committee, but after the Shoah, that really changed. The hard work that they did to locate any survivors, to bring them, to sponsor them so that they could come back, that changed the meaning of family even more, because for many of those survivors, they had lost almost all of their blood relatives. Some of them didn't have any other blood relatives left. And the Gombiners were their family. They were each other's family. And that was just a common theme that I saw throughout the history of the society and all the changes it went through, the evolution of it. That was one thing that always seemed to be very consistent. And trying to look at my notes. I can talk more about the history of the society itself, if you would like, or history of Gombin a little bit, or other more anecdotes. I guess I want to know what you want to know. So, oh, we have someone from Falls Church. You're so close to me. So I guess I'd like to, exit out of this and open for discussion to answer any questions, if that's all right. Okay, I'm gonna do that. So we can turn mics on if if people have questions or comments or anything they want me to talk more about.
Let me ask Vicky to unmute us all, or maybe I can do it. Hold on.
Actually, everybody can unmute themselves individually if they want to.
Everybody unmute yourself. And if you,
Unmute. So what I would suggest is if you have a question for Lindsey, then you unmute yourself to ask the question. If we unmute everybody at the same time, we'll get a lot of background noise, which might be a little distracting.
okay.
So does anybody have further questions for Lindsey?
Yeah, I have a question. My name is Herb Schlesinger.
Okay.
I saw your list of Manchiks. My grandmother happened to be a Manchik, which you don't have her name.
Oh,
And I know her father was also Abraham, but it's got to be a different Abraham, I think, anyway.
what were her, did she have siblings?
She had a brother, Jacob, who came to the States. He was born, first of all, my grandmother, her name was Shana Miro. She took the name Jenny in the States. She died in 1928, so I didn't know her.
I'm
and
writing notes as you're saying this.
My grandfather was a Tiber. There were a lot of Tibers in Gombin. So she had a brother, Jacob, who also came to the States, and he was born in about 1873, I think. And she was born in 1880, about perhaps a little bit less than that, or a little bit older than that. Her father, as I said, was Abraham. And no, let's see. Abraham married Sarah Hodis, which is another name from Gombin. I don't have much information on her except that she had a brother, also Jacob, that was left behind. And that's about it. So anyway, I seem to be a part of the family that is probably one generation or probably two generations older than your grandfather. There must be a root there because of the name. So.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to get in touch and compare trees more, because we're definitely related somehow. And that was actually another thing I meant to talk about when I was doing all these interviews, is picking up on different people's names and other things and realizing, I think you two might have someone in common, or you might have someone in common, or we have a distant person in common. And one of the projects I really want to work on actually is getting everyone's family trees and seeing if I can piece things together. And I know, is Michael Shade here? I don't see Michael Shade, but I know he's been doing a lot of genealogy work with that as well.
Lindsey, Michael's here. He looks like his.
Oh, got it. There he is. Maybe he can talk a little bit about that, but I know he's been doing genealogy work, not just of Gombin itself, but of the neighboring shtetls, because there is so much crossover. And so he's also working to really put the piece of all the puzzles together. And this is a perfect example. This is so great that you're here and that we have that. And I'd love to talk to you more about that, Herb.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Let me react to Herb's question also. This is Bernie. You know, on the Gombin website, there's a section on family stories. So if you've done some research on your family and you have something that you've written, we would welcome putting it on the website so that others can see it and maybe make some connections for you.
That would be great.
Please share anything that you've done.
Okay.
Yeah, Art, did you want to unmute yourself? You're muted. I can't hear you. It looks like Arthur's trying to
Yeah, no, I keep asking him to unmute. And I don't see where I have control over it. I'm trying.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah,
There we go.
okay. There's
Hi.
hi, terrific article. There's a interesting new book that's just been published called Plunder by Menachem Kaiser. And he also discovers, he's a young man, discovers and explores his roots in Poland. His approach was to try to recover some property. But I'd ask you, take a look at it. It's in some ways a brilliant book, because he established a sort of a relationship with the reader in a very, very interesting way. And you might find that, and I was wondering whether you thought about expanding this into a book of discovery.
I actually, that is something that's been on my mind. Before I started doing all the interviews, I thought my article was nearly complete. It was already long. And after a few of my interviews, I called my boss and I was like, I have good news and bad news. Good news is I've had a bunch of interviews. I'm learning so many things. This is amazing. The bad news is that I think my article now needs to be a book, because there's no way I can fit this all into one article, especially because, again, when I mentioned, trying to figure out what to keep, what to leave out, and there were so many great stories from people about how their family survived, how they came to this country, various different things, and they were so powerful. And I felt so bad doing these interviews and getting those stories and not being able to include them. And so I've been brainstorming different ways that I can expand on this.
One second question is, have you looked into the next town up, Gostinian, as to the connections between these two little towns, maybe what, 10 or 15 miles from each other, with a vibrant community at one time, no longer, in terms of the Jewish content, might be also something to explore.
Yeah, and I've definitely wanted to look more into Gostinian and Lotz and Bach and Plots. Not really good at pronouncing everything yet. I'm gonna try to take some Polish lessons though. But yeah, that's definitely something that is on the to-do list.
Lindsay?
Yes, hi.
If Arthur, hi. As I said, a great, wonderful article, and it's so nice to be on this call. And I would love to follow up on Arthur with my great-grandfather having been born in Gostinian. Actually, that relates to the question I had in my mind. And I would love to see you follow up more about the history of the relationship among the towns there. In your talk, you mentioned the AKT 454 Gombin Register. I was not familiar with that, so I'm looking at that right now. And in the chat, I had said that I was on the 2019 trip that Leon led to Gostinian and Gombin, as well as Helmno and Kwask. But since 2019, I've learned that my great-grandfather's mother's maiden name was, which I didn't know. I knew her first name was Esther. It was K-O-N, so Cone or Con. And I see lots of K-O-Ns on the Gombin Register. I don't see Zweighaft, which is my great-grandfather's name as well, or the Polish spelling. So I would be really interested to understand, and I know nothing else about her family, but I do know that now that was her name. at the time of her death anyway. So she may have married into the family, but knowing that my great grandfather was born in Gostinian, I'm curious as to how much contact there would regularly have been between those two communities.
I talked to a number of people who had relatives from both places. And so the AKT, the translation that we have, I believe was mostly the initiative done by Ada. And I believe Michael Shade is currently working on the other registers from the neighboring shtetls to kind of get those translated so that we can put it all together a bit more. Because that's definitely something I want to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Lindsay. This is Philip from London. My family name is Tatarka, and I was fascinated by what you said about your, I think, grandfather with the milk bottles. In the, I think, whatever the number was, 80, AKT 45, there are lots of Tatarkas. My grandparents are on there, and two brothers came with two sisters, and they married here. But the interesting thing for us was their father was a milkman in Gombin. They talked about it, that he was a dairy merchant, but he was a milkman. And I have pictures of them. That's one of the things we don't share here, but I have pictures of them, and they all look like they came out of Fiddler on the Roof. Definitely my family looked like they came out from Fiddler on the Roof. Or you want to see, somebody wants to see me, start my video. Here I am. So, yeah, so it's interesting. And then the other thing was when you talked about the wider thing of the Gombiner of the Gombin Society and family. When my grandparents came here in the early 1900s, they became Turek because they couldn't spell Tatarka. And my grandfather couldn't write, and he ended up with his brother's name, and his brother ended up with his middle name. But they found a family that had come called Romalovsky, and they had come earlier from Gombin, and they did exactly what the Gombin Society said. They took them in, and I see pictures of my grandparents and my aunts and uncles when they were very young, staying with this family in the East End of London before they got on their feet, you know?
That's great. Yeah, I wish I had pictures of Abe at his dairy business. If I didn't make that clear enough, the picture in my slideshow was photoshopped, but that was his face, just nothing else. But I actually do have the bottle right here too, because I think size is important. I was not expecting it to be this big. The A on the front, the M on the back for his initials, and then a nice big A on the bottom. Thank you, Michael Kaplan, for letting me have this one.
No, it's nice that you've got that as a memory. Some of the photographs that I've kept when we were sorting out things from my grandparents' house, the pictures were actually taken probably in Warsaw. I guess, I don't know if there are any society photographers in Gombin at the time or Plock, but they're quite interesting, and maybe one day we'll have, maybe a page on the Gombin thing. We can put some of our relatives on there. I never knew my grandfather, but certainly not my great grandparents, but we have their pictures here. So
yeah, definitely. I think the more family stories and photos on the website, the better. I think we only have one photo of any of my relatives in Gombin, and that was my great-great-grandfather Abe, great-great-grandmother Minnie, and then one of their 10 children, their sixth child, Charlie, because they, in 1922, they went back to Gombin to bring the funds that the relief committee had raised. They traveled back to Gombin to bring those funds, as well as do some other family business, settle an estate for a relative who had passed. And so there is one picture that Michael shared with me of the three of them in Gombin. And to my knowledge, that's the only photo of them in Gombin that we have.
So for my show and tell at the next Zoom meeting, I pledge to bring a picture. They're all here. I will bring a picture and you can all see if you really think they all look like out of Fiddler on the Roof.
Yeah, my
Oh, you would
mom
not
actually
look
told
like
my mom said that when my parents went to Gombin without me, she was looking around to kind of see who looked like each other, see if we all look related in some way, because the farther you go back, I'm sure we have more and more ties. I mean, maybe not my family, because my great-great-grandparents were cousins and my great-grandparents were cousins. So we might not have as many relatives in connection, but I'm sure a lot of you do. Anita, did you want to?
I think that it would be great if on the website we had a place where people could post pictures and ask for help in identifying the people in the pictures. I have a lot of pictures. My father was born in Gombin, and I have a lot of pictures with people from the 1920s and 30s. And there are many people in the pictures that I cannot identify and would love to find help in doing that.
I think that's a great idea. I think that's something that would be really important and meaningful to a lot of people. That actually reminded me of something else that I thought was really important in doing this research. A lot of the people who I spoke to who did have parents or grandparents who survived the Holocaust, as is common for a lot of survivors, they never wanted to talk about their experience. And so many of those stories were lost. And I felt in doing my interviews, it was like the closest thing, you know, I am interviewing the last people who knew their parents' stories, if that makes sense. And I feel like it's important to, as we said, remember, always remember, never forget. And I think it's important to not just document as many firsthand stories, but secondhand as well. Hey, Bernie.
So Lindsey, I want to ask you a question, which is a general question, and that is, how do we get more of our grandchildren and their cousins of your age to get interested in the Gombin? Because many of us are getting to an age where we sort of, we're at the end of the life spectrum, not at the beginning, but the important thing is to get an interest in your age group. Is it the process of the research itself? Is it the genealogy? What is it that attracted you that we should be passing on and making available to others of your age group?
Okay, so I guess there's two parts to that question. In terms of my own interest, I think part of it was just I didn't have that much family knowledge. And so getting just that one little bit was so cool to me. I wanted to learn more and have more of a story. And to the second part of your question, in terms of getting younger generations involved, I forget who said this during one of my interviews, but someone said, you know, with genealogy and that interest, you either have it or you don't. I think it appeals to more people than others for whatever reason. So I think some of it is just whether you have that interest to begin with, but I think another part of that is what you're doing it for, in terms of, are you doing it to find relatives? Are you doing it to learn history. There's different reasons for learning those things and wanting to learn those things. And I think if we can kind of figure out as many different avenues that you can take, the wider net we'll have to attract people, if that makes sense. I also think getting more active on social media will be helpful, just because that's where a lot of people my generation see things, find things, etc.
I think I'm unmuted, so I hope you can. Everybody can see that.
Oh,
I know what my pictures are. So the two standing up are my grandmother and grandfather, and sitting down are my great grandmother and great grandfather, her parents, and that was taken in Gombin. The other picture I found of the wider family, which didn't make it, they look more like the Addams family, I think. There is an inscription on the back, all in Yiddish, but I can't translate because my father's no longer here. But this was my wider family, so maybe I'll put that up. But I definitely think my great grandfather looks like Tevye the milkman, I think.
Two things. One, I don't know if this would be for Vicky or Bernie, but someone had just messaged me that they were trying to get into the talk and couldn't. I don't know if they're still trying, but if there's any pending acceptances, we could look at that. But the other thing, back to you, Philip, I don't know if you're on social media, but there is a